Welcome to the Jill on Money podcast. It's Saturday, June 12th. And I don't know about you guys, but over the past week, it's been flamin' hot in the Northeast. Many parts of the country are flamin' hot. I'm going to keep saying flamin' hot. That's your clue as to who our guest is this weekend. It is Richard Montañez. He is the guy who went from being a janitor at Frito-Lay to being one of the people involved with inventing Flamin' Hot Cheetos. He's got a great story. He's got a fun book. It's called Flamin' Hot, the incredible true story of one man's rise from janitor to top executive. This is the first part of our interview with Richard Montañez. So you've got this amazing story. The Mexican-American rises up, rocks and rolls. The Flamin' Hot in the title of your memoir has to do with Flamin' Hot Cheetos. So we booked this interview, I don't know when, Mark, back in April-ish, and the book's coming out now in June. And in the interim, Richard, there was like this crazy-ass long LA Times story. The headline was insanity to me, which is the man who didn't invent Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Why the LA Times come after you, and what's the deal with this story?
I'll never know why they wrote that story, so I have no idea. My first reaction was confusion. I was like, what? I'm just like, no, this can't be.
They're basically saying that you didn't invent the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. So what is the official PepsiCo response to that? And what's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is very, very simple. All I know is my story. All I know is my life. All I know is what I did. What somebody else did, I have no idea. When PepsiCo came out with their statement, they're like, okay, it made me feel a whole lot better. It was a few days of, ups and downs. And first thought was, after 42 years with PepsiCo as a great ambassador, what is this? And then once PepsiCo, began to share that there was, miscommunication or whatever it was, I really don't have any details. I stayed away from details. But when I saw the statement, like, okay, and then, people came up in my defense. As far as I was concerned, case closed and let's move on.
I mean, look, first of all, you can't control a lot of this stuff. I'd rather kind of talk to you because it is your story. So let's be clear that if you want to read all about this gang, you can just figure it out yourself. But we're talking to the man whose story is inspirational. By the way, frankly, it's inspirational whether you actually created this one product or not. So I have to be honest with you. For all intents and purposes, it could have never been created and it would still be an inspirational story. So let's start a little bit. First, where were you born?
I was born in a small town called Guasti, California. And the history in Guasti, California, it was built by a gentleman by the name of Segundo Guasti. He was an Italian immigrant. And he came down and saw that the land was perfect for grapes and wine. So he brought more Italians with them, and he built a little town. And then it grew so big, he needed labor. So that's when the Latinos come in. So it was a town of Italians and Latinos. And it was a very, very, maybe, and again, there's no history, and I'm just talking from my childhood. It might have been 2,000 people there. He built a little general store, very little. He built a church, a replica of his hometown. And he built buildings there. He built a big restaurant there. From my understanding, he was a very good man. Of course, he was way before my time. But those are the stories that my grandpa and my dad would tell me.
Tell us a little bit about your sort of entree into the work world. How did you get to Pepsi? What brought you there? And talk a little bit about your career and what happened.
To go all the way back, I was looking for jobs. So I worked at a car wash, and in between I had wherever temporary jobs, factory jobs. I've done everything. When I got the job at the car wash, one of my old friends, a young man, see me and he said, "Hey, I'm working at Frito-Lay." He goes, "They're hiring." I said, "What? They're hiring?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, "Go apply." And I was just like, I was on a cloud. I thought for a moment, Frito-Lay, isn't that the chip company, the Lays and the Fritos? And I'm like, oh my God, just think if I could get a job at Frito-Lay. That's my big break. That's like, I've never had insurance in my life, and then, I'm starting a family. So like, okay, they have health benefits. They have, That's all I thought about was the health benefits. Like, wow, I could change the legacy for the Montañez family. And I know people would say, what are you talking? It's a factory, but I've always said, there's no such thing as just any job. When you believe in your heart, you're going to be the best. No such thing as just a janitor. So I went and I applied, and I actually, asked them if I could bring the application home. I was a terrible, I struggled with writing and spelling. I still do. Said sure, and took it home. And my wife, who has been my inspiration, my partner in everything. I don't know where I'd be if she wasn't around. She filled it out for me. Then I took it back. The HR man, well, they weren't called HR. I think they were called ER, Employee Relations.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's a long time ago, it's in the 70s. So he looks at it, he stares at it, and then he looks up at me. And I'm getting nervous because it's like, I'm just thinking, what is on there that shouldn't be on there? It's like, so he looks at me and then he asks this question, did you fill this out? I said, yes. He looks at me again and goes, you have nice handwriting. And I just remember, I've been stealing Judy's credit ever since. So,
oh, that's awesome. And so was she working at the time? Were you both working, or was she home with kids? What was going on?
She was working part-time. So, she was, wherever she could get, a part-time job, never full-time because she was always with the kids. Got the application and, he said, okay, can you start tonight? And I said, absolutely.
So you get this job. How do you start moving up in this massive organization?
Well, I think, first I need to, share with you how I shared with my dad and my grandpa. They were so happy for me because in those days it was a union job. So, everybody wanted a union job, right? And I remember my grandfather said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to mop the floors. And he said something to me that I teach this to young people, and I believe it's the reason I'm successful. He said, when you mop that floor, you make sure that it shines. When people see it, they know that a Montañez mopped it.
Oh, that's great.
And I took that on. I just started mopping the floors. And then I saw, as I was mopping the floor, I learned all my leadership through my trials and errors, through the streets, the places that I've been. It's not formal, but yet it doesn't mean it isn't right. It's just a different way, So I saw that I had an influence. And then, people say, how can you influence? You're just the janitor. And I had an influence without saying one word because my job was to clean the restroom. So I made that thing spotless and made it smell fresh. My job was to clean the break rooms. I did the same thing. My job was to clean all the offices before the managers came in the morning. So I saw that people were going in and like, wow, it smells so clean in there. Who did that? The new janitor. Hey, who cleaned the lunchroom? The new janitor. And the managers would come in. Hey, who cleaned my office? Hey, that new guy, Montañez. So I saw that, wow, I'm having an influence without even saying a word. I'm putting a smile on people's face without saying a word, just going by what my grandfather said. But then, I don't remember how long it was, but there's a probation period. My boss, I still remember his name. His first name was Jim. At the end of my probation, or 2 weeks before the end of my probation, he called me in and he said, I'm going to have to let you go. I was devastated.
Freaking out.
I was devastated. My final, my big break, and I blew it. And I begged him for another chance, and I said, well, what's the problem? I'm doing what I'm told. He goes, that's not the problem. You're doing what you're told. You just show no initiative. I didn't know what that meant, so I went home again to Judy, who's an intelligent person. I said, what does the word initiative mean? So she read it to me out of the dictionary, and I was stunned. Since that day, I think I've gone overboard. I think that's why I am the way I am. I never wanted anybody to ever tell me I showed no initiative. But see, here's what he meant, is I was doing such a good job that I was finishing, my duties in half the time because I wasn't messing around. So what I would do is I would start all over again. He goes, you do what I tell you to do, but when you finish and you have time, you don't do anything else. So I figured it out. So once I finished, my daily shift, whatever time I had left, I started helping other people. I started taking other people's trash out. I started going out into the floor. I started learning the equipment. Other managers were saying, hey, thanks for letting us use Richard.
Now it gets sort of like you sort of become, you're being spoken about.
Yes. And he's like, what do you mean? I didn't let Richard do anything. He goes, no, I know, but he helped Frank take out the trash, or he took Frank's trash out. And these guys were line operators. They were the pilots. I've gone to and done things that weren't my job, but that's who I am today. Is Yeah, I'm going to do something that you don't pay me to do.
We'll be back with you tomorrow to hear more about how did those Flamin' Hot Cheetos come to existence. I asked for a crate of them. None has arrived. I just want you to know that. So I still haven't tasted them, but I plan to. If you have a financial question, maybe you have an idea for the next hot snack food, give us a holler. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Do us a favor. Go over to Apple. Leave us a review and a rating. It helps us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to lift someone up today. Grit, growth, grace. We'll talk to you tomorrow.